All right, welcome back to another special edition of The Unknown. My name is Michael Volpe. I'm in Chicago, Illinois. That's in Cook County, Illinois, and I write at michaelvolpe.substack.com. Richard Luthman, he's around Fort Myers, Florida. I don't know exactly where, but I do know that that is exactly in Lee County, Florida. For some reason, he's really proud that that's named after Robert E. Lee, even though he lost bitterly the Civil War. All right, and so you and I spoke with Paul Boyne like a week and a half ago, and I love this phrase, this legal term. Ever since I figured out what it means, I want to establish foundation. So Paul Boyne is really a political prisoner. But he won't even necessarily admit that he wrote these blogs, but most likely he wrote a bunch of blogs on the family court circus. It was exposing primarily judges and other court actors in Connecticut, though he ventured into some other states. Those judges didn't like that. He would get off the rails a little bit from time to time. And some of the blog posts have language that some people, stupid people, I would say, think crosses the line from free speech to criminal speech. So this is a list of phrases that Professor Eugene Volokh, who teaches at UCLA, found that he thought could possibly be problematic. So, for instance, Judge Mukashower, quote, in the crosshair sight of a firearm, the quote, the judicial vengeance of Judge Mukashower bags a 50 cal to the head. Talk of assassinations, he would refer to assassinations and 50 caliber ammunition, the items listed in 16. Is she begging, I think is what he meant, for a 308 shot to the head through two panes of window glass from an oath keeper concealed in the woods behind her house? A quick 50 cal to the head delivered through the back window of her car. A quote, worthy of a 50 cal to the head. These are all referring to judges. The Molotov cocktail stuff, he would say, throw Molotov cocktails at them. Hunt die-card and related material. Are there enough 50 cals for all the chosen heads in need of redemption? I know that Professor Eugene Volokh is supposed to be a First Amendment expert, but if he thinks any of those really are illegal, he should go back to first year First Amendment classes and get a refresher course. None of those, I think, are even close to what you'd call a true threat. He's charged with cyber stalking, though. Ultimately, you have to prove a true threat, a legal term. Now, he got arrested in the summer of 2023. We are in the winter of 2026, and we might be wrapping up this court case finally next month. Now, you have to explain something to me. Apparently, they picked a jury, but they're still on a break. How does that work?
So they do a pick and stick or pick and stash type technique in Connecticut, at least for this case.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's been up there since last Thursday. He had a court appearance,
Mm-hmm.
and they resolve a whole bunch of stuff, with pretrial motions.
Mm-hmm.
And then Friday was the beginning of jury selection. Well, the whole day on Thursday was spent, maybe the first 45 minutes. There was an overbreath argument, meaning that the statute itself was overbroad and the indictment, would fail. And the judge denied that. And then the rest of the day was spent with shuttle diplomacy. And what came out of the shuttle diplomacy was they tried to get Paul to resolve the case. They wanted to take a plea agreement. And for the three judges who were victims, they would have given him 3 months each, so 9 months of time served. There would be no probation, no supervised release, no fines, no nothing. He'd leave Connecticut, never to return. They were trying to give him that deal. And Jack Doyle, the state attorney for New Haven, let it slip that since he has 18 months in already, they're probably not going to seek any additional jail time, even if he goes to trial and loses.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul, hearing that, says, why? I'm just going to roll the dice here, because if I lose, I've got nothing to lose. But if I win, I can sue these bastards for millions of dollars in federal court. So now we're picking a jury in the Paul Boyne case. So Paul is in the middle
he has personal stakes to gain, but there's a larger issue here. If he takes a deal, then that not just a signal, then legally what he did was illegal. and it's not illegal. And he has to stand up for the First Amendment. And I'm sorry, Professor Bollock, but saying Judge Mukashar is in the crosshairs of a firearm. And by the way, when he would say that, he would have like 3 or 4 paragraphs, throw that in about a case, and then throw that in, and then continue talking about the case. And that's
If you look at
important context. Obviously, he's not actually threatening him. Uh, it's I don't know how you describe the language, but there's a very important First Amendment. He's standing up for everyone's First Amendment rights, and you have to state clearly that what he did is not wrong. So he's not only doing it for himself, in my opinion, he's doing it for every citizen of the state of Connecticut.
if you look at the Family Court Circuit's blog, preserved on that blog are statements by Paul Boyne from the period when Paul Boyne was purportedly the editor, as said by the Connecticut authorities, Connecticut prosecution, about a case where somebody had said that basically they used the same language with Barack Obama. They said they was going to put a 50 caliber in Barack Obama's head, and the guy won on appeal. They convicted him at trial, and he won on appeal saying it was First Amendment. So after that, Paul adopted, or the writer, the writings that are attributed to
here is the blog, and which part?
go to the very top. Go to the very top and go to about, and go to second. The second, hit about right there.
Right.
And so when I came on, and I'm the editor, when I came on, he talks about all this different stuff about the court, and this is about the suppression of the.
Right. This is important to me because in this page, he's discussing why his language is legal. Do you think that he is actually threatening anyone if, along with the so-called threat, he gives you a dissertation on United States Supreme Court history that says that it's legal? Of course not. So I think this is one of the most important parts of the case. Obviously, he's not really threatening anyone if he's then telling you why the U.S. Supreme Court allows him to do any of this. So the case is completely bogus. It's very important that he wins it. It's important for everyone's First Amendment rights in the state of Connecticut that he wins it. So I'm glad he didn't take it.
The thing is that the plea that they offered him was a stalking charge, and there's a case that Alito gave, your favorite present Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Alito, where he says stalking is not speech. That he came to the court on the stalking issue, and stalking is not speech. And that's what Paul basically said. He's like, look, stalking is not speech, and I cannot, compromise.
And they are basically trying to say, and I'm going to try to get deep enough into it to get to some of Paul's blogs. They're basically saying that by making these blogs where you suggest that somebody's head will be in a 50 cal or whatever he comes up with.
Go to the search bar, Mike, and type in judicial.
I'm not going to find
the search bar. You'll get to everything.
All right. So I know that he wrote about this guy, and so look, his language is not nice.
He uses the N word, and he uses
right there. That's not a nice word. That's not nice. Legal, but not nice. And they didn't like this. And frankly, I don't think anyone in the judiciary cared that he was using racial epithets, sexual epithets. He was exposing a lot of the Connecticut problematic, if you will, court cases, primarily family court cases. And that's what they didn't like. So they went after him. They first used the FBI and then the Connecticut State Police, even though he was living in Virginia. But explain again how it is that they did pick a jury, or no? Did they pick a jury?
They started to pick a jury, and they've been there for 2 days. They started on Friday. A Monday was a washout or a wipeout because of the snow. And then today they're back, and they've, as far as I heard, my most recent conversations with Mr. Boyne, they haven't picked a jury yet. The only guy that they have is a guy with some military experience. He's been selected. But they had another guy today who Paul wanted, that was a computer scientist, and Doyle said, no, we don't want him. So they've been, it's slow going for a jury like this. It's going to be a big.
All right, but explain further. Let's say by the end of Friday, they have their 14. I think they're going to have 12 plus 2 alternates. So they get their 14. They don't actually start the trial the following Monday, do they?
They're going to bag them, and they're going to shelf them. and they're going to say, we expect you to come
So
back on
these
these days.
14 people are going to be told, we'll let you know when you come back, or they will they be
Yeah,
told you're
because
coming back on this date?
there's a couple of issues. There's going to be at least an in-camera review of about 1,200 pages of Virginia materials that was heavily redacted, handed over from the Virginia State Police. And there's also going to be what are called motions in limine, or threshold motions, which they deal before the trial with issues about admissibility of certain evidence, what comes in, what doesn't come in, what things can be argued, what type of argument is precluded by the court. So those are big motions too, and those can get hot and heavy for the motions in limine. There's also going to be disclosure of materials. They still like, part of the Virginia stuff is Brady. There's still stuff they're fighting over Brady. There's also going to be disclosure of exhibits and things like that. So there's a bunch of disclosure that has to be gone through. Okay, and then there's the motions in limine and everything else. So this could be literally, they pick a jury. It could take a month, 6 weeks before that jury gets called back. It's not inconceivable.
If you are one of the sad sack that gets picked, you're gonna be hating life because you don't even know when they're gonna call you back. They're just gonna
No,
let you know maybe next week, maybe the
look,
week after, maybe 6 weeks from now, maybe 5 months from now. We don't know.
the problem you have here is this. Like, who are the people that can sit on a jury and like have that type of schedule? The people that can do that are either retirees, right,
Mm-hmm.
or individuals who work for the city or the state, right? And so they'll get a pass to go to jury duty. If you have a large corporation, maybe there's a program where they'll let you go for a few days as a juror, if it's a big corporation. But most small businesses, they say, F you, get off of jury duty. Most people are professionals that own their own businesses. Get off of jury duty. So it's not something that you're going to get the best and the brightest that want to stick around for. You're going to get people who are either based on their situation, either they're retired and they have plenty of time, or they work for the state and the city where they'll let them off. And this is a trial, and we're gonna put up that witness list, Mike. Look at the size of that witness
All
list
right,
alone.
so we the main reason that we came on is because the prosecution, led by Jack Doyle, the New Haven County prosecutor, that's an elected official, the head of the office is the guy who is prosecuting Paul. That's pretty rare, folks. He submitted a witness list. Let's just go all the way through 68. Now, you've dealt with a lot of these. All 68 are unlikely to be called. Am I right?
They gave a full universe of people that they could call. That being said, that first 1 through 20, there are a bunch of them that are judges.
Right.
I don't remember a case in recent memory where judges get called, where a judge got called to the stand, let alone 7 or 8 judges called to the stand, or former
That is
judges.
a judge
You
that
know,
I know. That is a judge that she's Bazzuto is kind of a judge.
five,
She's the administrator now. That's a
five,
judge. That's a
four,
retired judge. And
Stewart's a judge.
and Hurwitz,
Colangelo.
I think, is a judge. And here's a retired judge. We're going to talk about Joette Katz in a minute, but let's talk about this guy right here. That's not a judge, Chris Ambrose. He's not a
Yep.
judge, but we both do know who he is, don't we?
Yeah,
Who's Chris
but if you look at that
Ambrose?
list, and you also have Colangelo, who's an administrator in the courts, right?
Mhm.
Then you have also other people there. I've never seen a situation where one judge, it would have to be very, very, limited testimony that a judge would ever give, and they're putting the judges on the firing line. I can't
Mhm.
see this thing going to trial for that reason. I
Well, unless
really,
they don't. Well, you got
no
to
fun.
call. Some of the judges are victims. You got to call the victims. Am I right? Supposedly,
Have 3 victims. You have 3 victims there. You got Mukauser, you got
Grossman
Grossman, and
and
was
Edelman and Edelman.
no
But
Edelman
you
or
got
Stewart.
Bazzuto. I think Allard isn't a judge. I think she's a lawyer. Um, but and you got Joette Katz, a former judge who's now a lawyer. But let's talk about Chris Ambrose. You
But
and
the
I
Supreme
both
Court
know him.
justice.
I does he have any direct relationship to this case?
Who's this?
Chris Ambrose.
Who? Yes, Ambrose is somebody who has been written about by the blog, and Paul Boyne said very mean things about Chris Ambrose. And Chris Ambrose
He
is one of the favorite blue-blooded sons of Connecticut. His brother represents New Haven Hospital and Yale University Medical Center. And so obviously, an upstanding citizen like Chris Ambrose was
He,
appalled
he,
by the
he is
Connecticut
also
movement.
alleged by all three of his adopted kids, including Mia. Did I get that right? Or is it Maya? I who
Yeah.
we both Mia, who we both spoke to, who told us we are not the first two people she has told that her adopted dad had molested her. She got away because she turned 18. Uh, and the blog wrote about Chris, but Chris may have a little trouble because you don't want to call witnesses to the stand who have perjured themselves prior, because that's pretty much the death knell. You may as well call Sammy the Bull Gravano over a guy who has perjured himself, because even if you have killed 19 people, you may still be an honest person. But if you have been proven by a court of law to be dishonest, that's pretty much the death knell. What I, I I don't think you wrote this, and this is about a month old. But what
That's a
happened
Frank
here?
Parlato
Why?
article.
It's on Frank Parlato's site, the FrankReport.com. But Frank didn't write it. But he was investigated. He's being sued. I think someone else wrote about the lawsuit that Ambrose is involved with Frank Parlato. How did Chris Ambrose possibly perjure himself?
So, when you go to court, you have to bring your papers. And what's the big thing you have to do? You have to pay a filing fee. So the filing fee in the federal court is $405. Christopher Ambrose, the genius that he is, said, I'm going to save myself $405 by claiming informer pauperis status. Basically saying I'm a poor person, so I shouldn't have to pay the $405. And then he filed immediately with his informer pauperis a motion to seal his informer pauperis application so nobody could see the informer pauperis statements that he made. And the judge, Sarala Nagala, in the District of Connecticut said, not so fast. You're going to put in the informer pauperis, that's fine, but I'm not sealing it. It's there for everybody to see. And so it became part of the court record. And then as soon as it was put out there, a whole bunch of people realized that what Christopher Ambrose was saying was demonstrably false, including his own daughter,
Wait, but
Mia
hold on.
Ambrose.
How could it be false? This guy used to be a hotshot screenwriter for TV, but then he got caught plagiarizing. By plagiarizing, basically almost not quite word for word, but very closely to another TV show. He just basically wrote the almost exact same thing. His career was over, and then since then he hasn't worked. Isn't he a pauper? What do you mean? He hasn't worked in like 10 years.
So
How do you know he's not a pauper? Money
he
runs out if
collects
you don't have money coming in for 10 years.
he collects monthly or quarterly royalties on the things that he did write, based on his, being a member, I guess, the Writers Guild or the Writers Union out there in LA. He also comes from a very wealthy Connecticut family. There's an estate battle going on. He has estate money, but he also has trust money, and he also has money that he stole from Karen Riordan. Karen
That's his ex-wife.
that he brought.
Right.
That's his ex-wife. So he was her quote unquote financial advisor. She was, he grabbed the money and she never saw any of it back. But look at this. This is his SNAP card, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is him on public benefits. And that's a card right there, the date, 12/18 of 2024. Chris Ambrose claims that he's on food stamps, or at least he is on food stamps. So he's claiming he's a pauper to everybody involved. And so Mia had submitted an affidavit to Frank Parlato, who he filed one with the court in the Parlato case. I think that Bandy Lee, who he's also suing, just recently filed another affidavit for Mia Ambrose that further amplifies some of these things. But some of this stuff, Mike, is beyond the pale. The guy's living right now in a $2 million beach house in Madison, Connecticut, on the water in Connecticut. The rent for it is close to $4,000 a month, and that's not the number he put on his informer pauperis affidavit. And there's, I think, in this article, a copy of the lease itself, or at least a page of the lease, that shows that he was very dishonest about the rent, and that's just one thing. Okay, that he's dishonest about. There's about 10 or so different facts. He was dishonest saying that Mia and her brothers were all dependents. Well, they're not. She's not a dependent. She hasn't been for a long time because she's not there. She's saying that the children were all in school. Mia's not there. She's not in school. She's 18. But also, you have the other two kids, and the eldest one is out of school as well. Okay, you have Sawyer, who's the 16-year-old, I believe, and he's still in school. But the other 18-year-old is not. So
Mhm.
Matthew's out of school. So he sits at home. He's not, and Chris doesn't let him do anything. But
Mhm.
the facts that he talks about in the affidavit are clearly demonstrably false. And he
All
says
right.
there that
So
the
and Paul and his attorneys will know about it, because Paul communicates with us enough. I don't see how Chris Ambrose helps these guys as a witness. I'm not even sure why you'd put him on the witness stand. I know that if I was Paul and his attorney Todd Bussard, I would be licking my chops for the opportunity to cross-examine him. I'm not sure what Chris Ambrose could provide to the prosecution, because I don't think that any of the blogs about Ambrose used anything like 50 cal or anything like that. So he's not a witness to any of the uh, so-called criminal acts. All he can
the
do is,
defamatory. No, no,
yeah,
no, no.
well,
But
one, he
they're
hasn't
going to
sued
argue this.
Paul.
The defamatory statements that were put in there, right? So here's the point. They're going to try to show a pattern of reckless behavior by Paul Boyne, saying things that are done. You know, if the standard is encounterment versus Colorado, that you have to either be intentional or you have to do with a reckless disregard of the truth in your statements, and you have no good faith reason to make the statements. So I guess their theory is to say that, and Paul has said that Christopher Ambrose is a pedophile. The
Correct.
problem
Now,
with that line of reasoning is
can Todd Bussard bring in my articles and your articles and Frank Parlato's
well,
articles and Wayne Dolcefino's videos and say, well, and say something like, well, is Paul Boyne the only one to accuse you
well,
of these so-called of these alleged
I think
crimes?
I think even better. On this witness list, we have the DCF, the Department
Right,
of Children and Family in Connecticut. They've
right,
accused him and they've
right. Now
investigated him.
that I found quite peculiar, and let's find it. I don't know
Children
why.
and Families. He just said on the second page. Stacy Foltz
Yeah,
and Lisa Stella.
I don't know who these two folks are. I'm not even sure why they would testify. But before we get to DCF, let's talk about Joed Katz. Who is Joed Katz?
Joanne Katz was the former commissioner for DCF. Before that, she was the Supreme Court justice, an associate justice on the Connecticut Supreme Court. She's
Mhm.
now at Goodwin and Shipman over in Hartford, one of the biggest law firms in Connecticut. And she's also an outspoken advocate that speaks a lot with the ADL and with
Mhm.
a lot of other groups. And she's basically a natural ideological enemy of Paul Boyne. Well, you can put it at that.
Right. All right. So you were speaking about Joed Katz. And
Joanne
so
Katz?
she was DCF commissioner. She was, I think, on the Connecticut Supreme Court. Now she's a lawyer, which is interesting. But she's involved in the case another way, and it's also curious that they would they would call her as a witness. So there was some things that Paul got in discovery, and he received an email chain and written in handwriting by, I believe, Samantha McCord, who is a Connecticut State Police detective who was one of the lead detectives on the case. And she write, cease and desist only to stop something or another. Speak, can't speak to only. Now, we all assume that is Joed Katz. And so it seems like Samantha McCord is like using Katz, not using, but it's like Katz is directing this investigation. Now, Joed Katz wrote an interesting editorial in the Connecticut Law Tribune, I think it was 2022, where she suggested that what Paul was doing was illegal. And then, wouldn't you know it, the next year, Paul was charged with a crime. And all of that is set up, and then she's going to be a witness. Is that right? I
I don't think that.
again, why would you put this lady on the witness list? If I am Todd Bussard, who is the lawyer who's representing Paul Boyne, I'm licking my chops to get to ask her a few questions.
what they're going to argue is this. I think this is their theory, and it's a convoluted theory to begin with, but here's what it is. The courts were looking at, the family courts specifically were looking at individuals who were talking to litigants that weren't lawyers, but were kind of just trying to help them out. And so one of the people that was identified was Frank Parlato. One of the people that was identified was Paul Boyne, and the people that were identified were basically journalists. And so the reason why they were talking to people were journalists, and they wanted to write articles. And there was this list that they developed, and Parlato and Boyne were on it. But they got to the point where they were alleging that Boyne was engaged in the unauthorized practice of law because he was helping people to upload.
But well, they
couldn't let that stick. If you go back to that Joe Katz email, it says cease and desist only. They're not going to do anything beyond that cease and desist, because all they can do is tell them, stop doing that, stop it. They can't do anything further than to really just sternly caution somebody to stop doing something, because there's no crime that's being committed when you go to that letter. So they're going to tell that narrative that he's been a stone in the shoe. See, cease and desist only. So only send this guy a cease and desist at that point. And then, talk to Katz, speak to Katz only. Stop uploading. So he was helping people upload. Like, one of the people is Karen Riordan, Christopher Ambrose's ex. And so, she would call up Paul and say, Paul, Chris just sent another 800-page motion, and he's driving me crazy.
Listen, hold on. If I'm Todd Bussard, then I stand up and I say, objection, Your Honor, relevance. What Paul may have done with court litigants and provided help, and whether or not he was acting as an attorney, it has nothing to do with whether or not these blog posts represent a true threat and thereby are cyber stalking.
The problem you have there, Michael, with that thought is that it's too reasonable for Connecticut. You have a judge who's already ruled that the First Amendment is not something that he can rule on. He's going to leave it for a jury. Right. So the First Amendment defense, he didn't want to rule that this case should be dismissed on First Amendment grounds, because that's a question for a jury. So what is this judge going to say? In any other place where people have rational brains and oxygen, they would say that it would be irrelevant. This is so far afield. But everything that you read the tea leaves, Jack Doyle's going to get a large leeway. Yes, it's going to be. He's going to tell whatever story he wants. It's going to turn into whatever epic soap opera he wants to turn into.
All right, now. They're going to call members of the Connecticut State Police. You got to call the investigators to once again develop a foundation. Now, there is something interesting. All of this got kicked off. It was a June 2022 raid. I don't remember the exact date. And they knocked down his door. They didn't get all the proper warrants, it appears, to transfer things. Paul still is, but at the time was living in Virginia. They got a Virginia warrant. They were supposed to get another Connecticut warrant. Doesn't seem like they got one. But there's also a dispute over how many Connecticut State Police detectives were at this raid. Paul says there were 2. A Hartford Courant article says there were 2. Jack Doyle says there was 1. Paul told us that 1 was Samantha McCord, and I believe right there's Sammy. She has a crush on me. She likes to talk about me a lot. He said the other one was a woman. He'd never met her before. Now, if you look, all of these are male names except 2. Samantha McCord, Jamina Bonilla. I think we may have found our second Connecticut State Police detective, because nobody else on this case is a man.
Paul texted me. He said McCord's sister, still not declared. Jack still, this is as of today, still says only 1, and he says the other name on the list is not her.
All right. So we're still at 1 juror. They're going to take 5 weeks just to pick a jury. All right. Danbury Police Department. Why would they call anybody from the Danbury Police Department?
Who knows?
Who knows? And then they got some goon. I believe these are members of the Goon Squad. When I say Goon Squad, they actually have security in the Connecticut Judiciary. So that's members of the Goon Squad. We learned from Discovery that it appears that the Goon Squad, the Connecticut Judiciary, did a long investigation of Paul. Has he gotten he got like 16 pages out of a
There's
lot.
like four. He got 14 pages out of like the 93 or 92 page
Right.
report, and
So
this is
they,
and the best part is his counsel has it. Paul doesn't even have it. He's not allowed. Peter Brown, the judge, has said Paul's not allowed to have discovery from his case, and he's only allowed to see it. He's not allowed to take notes about it or anything when he's with his lawyer. And they filed a motion in the court last week on Thursday, and some of the discovery was exhibits. And Paul asked the judge specifically, can you give me copies of the discovery that were the exhibits? And the judge says, no, that's discovery. You can't have it, even though it's a public court document. When you or I or Ed Mahoney could walk down to the court clerk's office and get copies of that motion in full, Paul's not allowed to possess what the public can possess. That's how dangerous Paul Boyne is.
that's pretty ridiculous. But it sounds like if they're going to call members of the goon squad, that Paul's lawyers can ask him about this report that they put together. I don't know why they want to call members of the goon squad. They got Virginia State Police. I assume these were some or all of the people who joined the Connecticut State Police on the raid of Paul's house in 2022. That's why they're calling them. The Herndon Police Department.
The big guy on that list, Mike, the big guy over there, 51, Sponheimer. He's
Mhm.
the one who was in charge of that Virginia raid. He's the one that handed all of the evidence to Sammy McCord without inventorying it in Virginia, compliant with Virginia law, and getting an order from a judge in Virginia to hand it over to another state authority. So Sponheimer is the most important guy on that list.
And if you want to know more about that, you and I interviewed Paul about a week and a half ago. That's what we focused on. If they call this guy, it sounds like Bussard should be licking his chops for some questions with this guy. The Herndon Police Department, I think that's where Paul lives. I don't know why they're calling anyone from there. Wait a minute. DHS? Whoa. Ice Barbie's two of her goons are on the witness list. Christopher Hall and Corey Bullseye. I don't know who they are. Do you have any idea why members of Department of Homeland Security would be called?
Yeah, I think they're probably upset that Paul's under indictment because they probably wanted to call him up into active service.
Right. Department of Emergency Services, I can only imagine why they are being called, but we got to get to number 61. Connecticut Office of Attorney General William Tong. Well, some people may not know who William Tong is, so I'm going to give you guys a quick refresher. William Tong isn't just a member of the Attorney General's office. He is the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut. What is going on here? Why in the world would the head law enforcement officer for the state of Connecticut need to be called in a case in New Haven, which already has a prosecutor? Why is the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut being called for this case?
The last thing a politician ever wants to do is go under oath. And so I don't think that Attorney General Tong, number one, being a politician, is too happy with being included on that list. But it's something that is, I don't know. I don't know what Jack Doyle is thinking. What positive could come for his case for that?
Even if it's a bluff, I've already reached out to the office. Now he's on the witness list. So even if this is a bluff, you've already thrown him in. The same with DHS. Why would you put these guys on there? And let's finish up. The Connecticut Department of Corrections, Paul was in jail for a while. He exchanged a lot of emails. I didn't see all the emails. I doubt very much that he ever said anything incriminating. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why they're calling. The last two, all these guys are going to be called to prove that Paul was the one who was writing all of these blogs, because all of that has like electronic relationship to the blog. That's why they're calling them. I don't know why they're calling William Tong. Yeah, I don't think William Tong is very happy to be included in this high-profile case. Look, you and I are going to make sure that Ed Mahoney gets it, because maybe he writes for the Hartford Courant. Maybe Ed Mahoney can write that the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut is on the witness list for Paul Boyne's case.
Maybe I just don't get this. This is like boneheaded moves from my perspective. It really is.
Look, I think I said this to you when we interviewed Paul. They wanted to keep him in jail because if they kept him in jail long enough, he would take a plea. once he got out of jail, he wasn't going to take a plea. I don't think they had a plan B. And so what you are seeing is prosecutors who have no idea what they're doing.
I think you can't say it better than that.
Right. No, this witness list is just, it's not wise. All right. This is not a wise witness list. Why would you put Chris Ambrose, even if you don't call him, why would you put him on the witness list? Um, just dumb. Joette Katz, why would you put her on the witness list? Some of the judges, you're going to have to call them. By the way, Bazzuto, I think she's an administrator now. She was one of the judges on Paul Boyne.
She retired. She retired the first of the year, or December
Right.
31st. She's in retirement.
She was one of several judges on Paul Boyne's case. The first time I did a story with Paul Boyne for Rebel Pundit, which no longer exists, it was about Elizabeth Bazzuto. One of the first articles I did on the judiciary, and I interviewed Paul. That was when I first met Paul. So look at this list. I mean, you're exposing a lot of different people. A lot of these people, no one knows that they work for these organizations. They are cops. They want to keep that on the down low. I mean, you're exposing a lot of Virginia State police officers, DHS officials. Not wise. Jack Doyle, John is his, I guess, John is his given name. He goes by Jack. This just seems very, very foolish. I would say that Jack, well, no, look, you got to take this to trial and hope against hope that you can somehow get a conviction. But the Paul, I'm 99.9% certain that Paul's not only going to get an acquittal, but he's going to be spanking them in court all throughout, left and right, here, there, north, south, east, west. And this is going to set up for a serious lawsuit after he gets this acquittal, in my opinion.
Look, there's an issue that, and you brought up a very important point with law enforcement, and it's even heightened now because of all the judges. Situation where you have law enforcement people on there now, given this witness list, you can request background on every one of these law enforcement people, right? You may very well be able to request judicial complaints on the judges too. Mm-hmm. You may be able to, because you get that as material. If the government's going to use a state, an officer, you get that material as part of your discovery. I don't know if that discovery was given over. I don't know if it was asked for, but now it might be a common given this witness list for it to be asked for. But why do you then take that situation and let them redredge all things that happened for all of these law enforcement officers in their personnel files, and maybe these judges as well as put them into a situation where they could ambush the judges? Let's say you get Grossman on the stand, and I know 4 or 5 people that had Grossman, and I could probably get a dirty hits list of Grossman pretty easily. I think Paul could probably get one much easier than I could, doing this for a lot longer, and you just get him with some ambush questions. And then why are you going to allow judges to get tarred like that? Why are you going to let law enforcement get tarred like this? This entire case is ill-conceived. It's going to hurt Connecticut. It's going to hurt the judicial system. The fact that they haven't, they should just withdraw the case and come to a stipulated agreement with Paul and hand him a bag of money and tell him to go away. That would be the smartest thing to do. They've
carried it too far. They're even apparently going to call Paul Boyne's parents. I guess that's what's called a hostile witness. So I suspect that Jack Doyle thought this would intimidate Paul. I'm sorry. Paul is laughing at these people right now. If I'm Todd Bussard, I'm licking my chops to be able to call some of these people. And I don't think that Bussard needs to put on a case. I think that he needs to be prepared to aggressively cross-examine each and every witness, and he will provide way more than reasonable doubt. And he should get his client off easily if it even gets that far. But this is an embarrassment for Doyle. This witness,
they put on the case, and at the close of the prosecution's evidence, they make a motion to that they didn't meet their burden, they didn't meet all the elements, that type of thing. If it's me, the way I would play it, and I would put, and I'm Paul Boyne, I would take the stand. I got nothing to lose and everything to gain, because every time they want to hear about this guy, Paul Boyne, the entire prosecution's case is going to be the vilification of Paul Boyne. And the fact that he can sit up on a stand for several days and put together complete sentences in a cogent way, and looked like he's someone who's actually able to read and talk and everything else. And he's a very charming guy if you talk to him. That will, I think, win over the jury to say, yeah, this is
No,
some
but
type of
you
vendetta, and
think
we
they
don't want to
should
get involved.
call? You think they should call Paul Boyne to the stand?
Yeah, I think they should
You
call him to
do.
the
That
stand.
almost never happens though in a
And
defense.
he's got no risk. He has 18 months of jail time.
Right.
They're not going to ask for more jail time. I don't think they can get more jail time on a case like this. There's like nothing there. And he's got nothing to lose, everything to gain. If he wants to bring a civil suit, he's established everything. He creates his record. If they try to railroad him at the trial, he's created a record. And he gets to go down everything that everybody said. He can go down every witness that went before and say why what everybody said was bullshit. It's like, well,
Right.
this one's on the stand, and everything they said is bullshit because of this, 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 and this. And everyone that said, and Paul knows it better than Todd. Todd's only on the case for a year and a half or a year or something like that. Paul's been living the case. So I think Paul knows the law, he knows the facts, and he can tell the story a lot better. He's a journalist. He's a blogger. He can tell a story better than anybody. So I think he should take the case.
Right. All right. Well, we'll see. All right, guys, we're going to be back later in the week for some other news events, but we're out for now.